Okay. Well, hey, everybody. Here at Jeff, we're going to be doing another edition of Let's Talk, where we dive in a little bit and talk more about the real life application of Sunday's teaching. And so, Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we talked about on Sunday?
The big thing of the whole series has been trying to live at peace with other people, help other people get to close to God as much as you can. But some of the people that we have to bounce off of don't always have our best interests at heart, or sometimes they're dealing with their own issues, and how we manage that can be complicated. And this week, I wanted to talk about people who their life really is heading a different direction than yours, and you're trying to be as friendly as you can, but it just seems like you're going two different directions. And how do you maintain a great relationship there, and how do you build something there? Sometimes as Christians, we have tried to do it through cliches and things like. I love the sinner, but I hate the sin. And as strictly speaking, I suppose that's all accurate. But no one ever really enjoys being on the receiving end of that kind of affection. I love you, but I can't stand any of the things that you do, or most of the things that you do. And I'm not even sure that God loves us like that. I think God doesn't love us in spite of who we are. I think He loves us. Period. Full stop. And I mean, I'm sure there's things about us that He wishes they would change, but not so much because I think that our sin does offend God, but not so much because it offends God, but really more because it hurts you. It hurts me. When I sin, when I get sideways, God's heart's full of compassion. I don't think that compassion wavers like mine sometimes does through little bouts of judgment. At the same time, what we talked about on Sunday is trying to manage if I allow my heart to get tied here with somebody else who's going in the wrong direction, how do I then make sure I don't start going in the wrong direction? And that was the gist of the whole sermon, and we tried to cover some of that. And Gabe sadly is sick today, so we've Josh is on staff with us, and he's going to help me kind of sort through this today.
Yeah, and one of the main driving verses of the whole series we're in is Romans 12:18. If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And the sad reality is it's not always possible, and it's not always possible, especially through our power.
Right. Well, and sometimes on today's topic and this week's topic, if someone's heading the wrong direction, some people won't let that go. It's a constant and persistent pull on you to get you to turn, and it's very hard for you to maintain the relationship without you also heading off. And again, I've never really. We could get off on a whole nother tangent here, but I've never really liked the notion that people will say all sins are equal, it's all the same to God. I don't think it's all the same to God in most contexts. I mean, certainly even one sin's enough to disqualify you from His righteousness, His holiness, but murder is worse than jaywalking, and the Old Testament and the New Testament would back that up. And some of the sins that we get into are frustrating, and I wish I could do better. And some of I had two pieces of cake, I should have had one, and I don't know what I was thinking. And then some of the sins are quite a bit more serious, and we have to kind of weigh that out too. If a relationship is taking you far from God, well, it won't be possible then to live at peace with Him, and you may have to create some separation, and you may have to create some distance, and that's always a painful thing for us as Christians, for us as human beings. That's a painful thing. But so anyway, yeah, that was kind of where I was headed with that. One thing that thinking this thing through, a lot of times when we talk about this topic, I think more like the youth minister, and I remember as a youth minister, this was always a frequent deal. The kid who wanted to go to all the same parties that everybody else was going to, because that's where the popular kids were, but knowing that those parties were pretty much bad news, and mom and dad don't let me go there, and they're so narrow-minded, and it was easy as a youth minister to get myself in trouble there, because I mostly sided with the parents. It was very rare that I said, sure, go on to the party. What's the harm? I don't think I ever said that. So that's when I first kind of ran across that, and that's an easy thing for us as adults to understand. What about the kid who wants to go to all the parties? I know you can't imagine that. Your little guys aren't wanting to go to any parties that you don't get to go to.
But I was that kid. I lived through that, starting to go to church when I was 17, almost 18 years old. I very much felt the intent was, when I started going to church, was I loved the youth group. I wanted to follow Jesus, but there was this natural pull of want to go and put myself in these environments where I can share what I found, and And I found I wasn't strong enough to do that. And the way it was broken down to me, and it may seem very elementary, but sometimes we need spiritual things broken down that way, was, think about the difference between a thermostat and a thermometer. The thermometer, it just simply reflects the temperature around it, and the thermostat, it changes, it sets the bar,
Right.
it changes the things. And so for me, I remember when I was taught that lesson, I thought, you know what, that you're right. I am called to do more than just reflect the culture in which I put myself around, but to really change things. And what I found in a lot of relationships was I wasn't helping those people be more like Jesus. They were helping me be less like Jesus.
Right.
And that's not at their fault, but that's the scenario I found myself in.
And hopefully, as we get older and stronger in the faith, we aren't as easily tossed back to and fro. Hopefully we get to a place where, now what you may find though is as you get stronger and more secure in what you believe, you may not get invited to those parties any longer. Maybe part of the reason they wanted to invite you to the party was so you would jump into all the same things that everybody else was jumping in, if you're not willing to do it. And that can be painful too. In fact, it's painful enough that some people will waver just because of that. I find it often with older teens and then certainly people in their 20s too, that people will make compromises with their dating. They will date people who are heading a completely different direction than they are, and then wonder how they ever got themselves in that mess after they're pretty deep. And it's the same thing again. I'm not saying that I'm not completely narrow-minded about this. I don't want to say that you have to date somebody who goes to Mount Pleasant or something like that. It's not that. And in fact, we have a lot of people at Mount Pleasant that might be bad to date. I don't know if you really dug into this thing. Just going to church is not a guarantee that someone's suitable. But I've seen people ignore that. They're attractive, or I like what they're doing here and here and here, and you ignore that they're really not heading the same direction you are at all in your faith, and then you allow your heart to get compromised, and then terrible mess. So those were my initial thoughts, all that kind of stuff. As I got a little deeper into it, though, I think that some of the worldliness that we get into, honestly, is a little more subtle than just sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Sometimes it's a little more, somebody whose only concern is finance. And so when you're with them, before you know it, your only concern is finance. And this keeping up with the Joneses might creep into your family, where you're trying all the time to have a little nicer thing because the other person has a nicer thing. And suddenly you're not the same anymore. It's subtle. They can do it with I on a completely side note, but it connects. I think what you're doing as a parent is going to be much harder than what I did, because I think there's more pressure than ever before on parents to have your kid involved in everything. If he shows any sign of athletic ability at all, then you better get him into football and basketball and baseball and soccer and just run him all the time. If your kid has any artistic or any, and you just run all the time, and that if you don't do those things, you're considered a bad parent. And the social pressures, my dad wouldn't let me participate. I remember in one school thing I won, I'm not driving you there every night. And not one of his friends thought that was a bad decision. Yeah, I wouldn't do that either. But that's not how my generation reacted. And it's even less how your generation, you're just expected to do that. And if you don't, what kind of a and so suddenly this whole motive, right, that I've got to compete, I've got to be here, and it can take you away. I don't think that makes sense or not, but it's things I was thinking about.
Well, it starts bleeding into an identity issue, and especially we'll talk about that at homecoming on September 12th, but it really does become an identity issue at that point, and it doesn't help. We're kind of living in I feel like a worldwide identity crisis, where people are trying to find other things to define them, and if you've not allowed Christ to define you, next thing you know, you will be drifting towards the direction you see other people drifting towards, and that's not always close to Jesus. A lot of times that's far away from Jesus.
In fact, frequently.
Yeah.
So, and I don't pin this on you, but what kind of boundaries do you think are intelligent boundaries to put up between somebody, so you don't go down that road? Or what's some intelligent ways to kind of check yourself or grade yourself so you don't go down that road?
I think one of the most important things is making sure all of your relationships, not that you have an agenda for that person you're friends with, or that coworker you decide to play cards with, or anybody who doesn't share the same Christ-centered values that you do. But I think you just need to be prayer-centric a lot in those relationships. And and you need to remember what your role is within it. Christ wasn't shy about that. He said things like, "You're the salt of the earth." He talked about,
Right.
you don't light a candle and put it under a bowl. He said, people like us, we're a city on a hilltop, and so he wants you to stand out. And there's
Right.
not an agenda, but there is intent in your relationships to love that person so well that they want to come into a relationship with Jesus. And so if you keep your relationships in the right focus and they're Christ-centered, I think that goes a long way. But I also think you have to know your limitations. I think with Paul, the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians, he said, I become all things to all people. But then he finishes that thought by saying, so some can be saved.
Right.
He knows his own limitations.
Right.
And that's the Apostle Paul
Right.
speaking on it. And I also think it's just important to, for us, whatever friendship circles we're running in, whatever we're doing, our spouse needs to know about that and be aware of the things that happen in those relationships.
Your spouse can be you talk about that thermometer again. Your spouse can be a fantastic resource for most all of us in terms of, man, you're different when you're with them. You don't act the same. When you're with them, you get all this attitude, or when you're with them, you're just never content. And sometimes we can dismiss that out of hand, and they know you better than anybody. So I think that's true. I spoke also on Sunday, and you said it really eloquently there about knowing your limitations. I think that's hard for all of us because most of us are a lot more. We're too self-confident about our ability to always know what's going on. We trust our gut too much, or I do. And so on purpose, if you're the kind of person who struggles with identity, talking about that, if it's something where you allow other people, you kind of take the personality of the people you hang out with, just be aware of that. You've done this now too. We've moved, Julia and I, from the south to the west coast and then back to Indiana, and when we would get different places, our families would say, "Your voice has changed." We would take on the southern voice in Tennessee, and then take on the Mexican, Californian voice in there, and then I'm sure I like to think I sound normal wherever I'm at. I think I sound normal now, but you change, and you don't just change your voice; you change everything. Mm-hmm. You said something at the beginning though, and I wanted to explore that. To be prayer centric. What are you thinking there? What in your head? Make it real elementary. I mean, like every day you kind of pray about your relationships. Every day you pray specifically for certain people. I mean, what are you thinking there?
Well, I think all of the above, but to use kind of a real life application illustration. I have the opportunity, and I know a lot of guys and gals do, to play fantasy football with a wide variety of people, and I know coming up in the next week or so, I'll be around some people who don't know Jesus. Right. And, for example, going into that, just be praying about, hey, as I'm interacting with these individuals, God, I hope they see your love through me and to strengthen me. And I think being prayer-centric for how you relate to those people, but also anytime you put yourself before the throne of God, it is this spiritual mirror that reminds you of your own sinfulness, your own shortcomings, and who really is behind all of this. Anyways, and one thing I do want to point out, because you've probably seen this happen, I have as well, is when you get Christian John, and John goes and he hangs out with his friend Matt, and he starts doing things he knows he shouldn't do. Right. It's very easy to vilify Matt. It's really easy to vilify the other person and think, when I'm around you, I turn into this mess, or I struggle with this. We have to understand that that's on us, but it's very easy to vilify the other people, and that's not who God called us to be as labelers, anyways.
No, and it on this prayer centric thing, because I know everybody, where people are watching, it's all different levels. Some of you guys pray very easily, and it's a sense for you to pray for a lengthy amount of time, and other people, just remembering to pray every day is kind of a struggle. But I like this idea, before you get together, just even a 1 or 2 sentence prayer. God, help me reflect you while I'm here. Mm-hmm. And certainly, if you're going someplace where you even praying that feels dumb, then maybe you're in the wrong place. Just a 1 or 2 sentence prayer. Because I don't think you want to start avoiding anybody if you can do it. I mean, I think our world is hungry for friendships, and I think friendships, even friendships that don't necessarily go towards a spiritual thing, it's good to love people. It's good to be kind to people. And as long as it's not taking you down a bad path, I would encourage you to have as many relationships as you can. But just a quick prayer before you go in, truthfully, even to church on Sunday morning. God, help me reflect you while I'm here. Help me make a difference. On a different note completely, the fantasy football, that's enjoyable.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a dynasty going.
Oh, nice.
So, I mean, I don't know if you knew who you're sitting next to.
No, I had no idea. Well, no.
Yeah.
And this is people from here and Maryland, or mostly Maryland people, or
No,
or Monrovia?
mostly here,
Okay.
Southern Indiana.
Okay.
And
you've won the last couple of years, or been very competitive?
4 out of 6 years.
There you go.
4 out of 6 years, folks.
See, I had a different feeling with fantasy football. It seemed like there was a 1 in maybe 10 or 15 chance that I would win the whole thing, and then every other possibility that I'd just be ticked off the whole time, the whole season long. And so my fantasy football career was sad. And I like to think of myself as sports knowledgeable, but I was sadly not. I just not nearly.
I mean, you're headed one direction. Some people are just heading
well,
a different
exactly.
direction.
I was too Colts centric. That's part of what got me in trouble. I kept trusting in Colts running backs, and that never paid off.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's it. That's about 20 minutes. It's kind of short. I would ask you, for those of you who watch regularly, to keep Gabe in mind. He's struggling with COVID right now. A lot of people in our church are struggling with COVID right now. And just be praying about that. It's such a hard time for our country. Even some of the things we've been talking about here today. I'm 53. I don't ever recall a time when our nation was as divided, just really about everything, as it is right now. I know there were some people who were hoping that was just because of Trump, but Trump's gone and we're still divided, and it just seems like as a country we just keep getting further and further and further apart. And even with this disease, it's not. A lot of times when bad things have happened to our country in the past, it kind of brought everybody together, but not this. It just continues to separate us out. So keep praying about that. And when we talk about being prayer-centric, that should be one of the things that's top of your list every day to pray about. And I do believe that our community's hungry for friendships. They're hungry for relationships. I think most people are much more lonely than you're aware. And as Christians, when we love, we reflect God. So we want to do that as much as we can. Any last thoughts or any last words?
No,
Okay.
you hit on it right there. The only thing I was going to add was that everybody in the world wants to be, fully loved and be fully known. I mean,
Right.
I think that being fully known and fully loved is one of the best feelings we'll ever experience on this side of eternity. And just with our actions, with our words, with our facial expressions, with our gestures, with everything in us, we have the opportunity to bring a little bit of heaven or a little bit of hell to this world. And there's a lot of people out there who just need the love that we've all experienced through Christ. And so, just be out there, be active in the community, and love people as best you can.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. We're glad you tuned in. I'm not as slick as Gabe about reading all the comments as we went along. He was always much more effective about that. So if you did send a comment or question in, I'll try to get back to you on the comments later on after this is over. If you didn't, well, that's okay. Don't no sweat. No big deal. We're not grading anybody. But I really appreciate you checking in. And I'm sorry about our inconsistent view times. As COVID and eye surgeries and everything else seems to have gotten us messed up. But we're doing better, hopefully, back on the right track again. And we'll see you next time.